This is Kulud Law, General of the Armies. This is a communique in response to the call on NBC Nightly News for businesses to report and try to help these problems with the cyber attacks and ransomware. I hold a business. It's called VINCENT DIAZ JR. It's a sole proprietorship. It is constantly under cyber attack. Back when this became possible by our technology, we were calling it cyber warfare, and it was terrorism, and still is. Step one of dealing with terrorism, now that they're prepared to call it what it is, terrorism, when it's a cyber attack, you never negotiate, you never pay ransom. Anyone who pays ransom is a terrorist in these plots this way. Ransom is a problem where you'll just always have to pay it. And they might also destroy or kill what you think you're paying to have that not done to. We need to control all economic activity so no one can pay ransom to prevent anyone needing to be charged. And we need to do so the way Russia is preparing to control its oil trade by stopping the use of currency entirely. The news said we're one step away from cities plunged into darkness. About my number one problem with, we called it cyber war. Cyber attacks are cyber warfare. It's warfare, it's terrorism, it's espionage, because we have the system controlled, so it's always a military issue that is espionage anytime anyone does any sort of cyber attack. We've controlled this with the physical terms of what computers are doing, in terms of what the physical stuff is that the computers are representing digitally, like ports of protocol and filing systems. Nearly everything is a port on a computer, any sort of input, output, any sort of window. And everything works through a filing system if it's not a basic input-output system of the computerized or computer device, computing devices. This is as serious as fighting with port protocol on September 11th, 2001, when we had a maximum lockdown, like at airports, just for doing it to any type of input-output porting system. Any place an electron flows through anything that can be considered a port, any sort of gate, gateway, any component to the next component is a port protocol as defined as we enhanced penalties over September 11th, 2001's attacks on the Twin Towers, starting the war on terror and the war in Afghanistan of the war on terror. So my biggest issue right now, as I don't really have time to talk about the horror and torture that my life is, as I am ransomed constantly, and the very basic operations of my systems using computing devices are taken hostage as I control the physical device while the cyber terrorists are at the interface with I from a remote location, is that I can barely keep electric functioning in it. I can barely hold a charge. I can barely get a charge. I barely have anywhere to charge. All of my equipment made so I don't have to charge at an AC outlet barely functions, if at all. All of the equipment I am buying to try to handle this, such as solar chargers and battery backups and banks, will barely function to their specification. I can barely get a charge for my computing devices with them turned off to make it a minimal amount of power, with having chosen devices to charge them that are the maximum amount of power to have to charge them. So this boils down to I needing about 2,000 milliamps, and I have a 500,000 milliamp device that I should be able to get a complete charge from, and I can barely have a completely full 500,000 milliamp battery backup charge my cheap, simplistic smartphone 2,000 milliamps to a full charge. There are signs this power is flowing, like my devices tase me and many other things. Over the sedition that is a conspiracy of a federal conspiracy crime, the penalties are the maximum for everyone taking part in any sort of cyber attack that is as simplistic as anyone with a computing device attacking with it in any way we can define by any code in any law, when the terms don't have to be in the context of a digital removal from the basic terms, like assault being about physical things happening of a physical nature, like a computing device assaulting someone in a basic way of causing harm that doesn't have to be an actual physical attack like a normal weapon. It can be something as simple as the motor that is the vibration function behaving against the standard operations of the device because someone has triggered it to do so. Or it could be the same basic term with the device making a noise or a visual appearance change. And anyone who has taken part in anything, even this lowly nature, and then taken place in this conspiracy of sedition to stop charges from being brought, as I have tried, on the whole species that does this, and it seems like it's the whole thing until I have to be honest about how I said I don't know what operator is at what device, when just having the physical device is not proof that that person is the operator of the crime with the device, or the penalty behavior with the device. And it seems anyone with one of these, except for I, maybe the other people I am, with some other people being them as well, that are fake news people, are taking part in sedition. If they will not ante up, admit their device is doing this, and they know, in a way, that means they're not trying to stop justice from being served, as I always do. And furthermore, if they are taking advantage of their device being out of legal operating procedures to either advantageously use that in a way that is not trying to stop it and bring penalties, or simply trying to stop legal penalties or justice penalties from stopping their device from doing it, they are part of this sedition federal conspiracy case and sentenced to death, because this is espionage. Everywhere any charge can be filed, and every case of espionage is a death penalty. So beyond the main problems I'm having, being held ransom at all times and always possible by these enemies of ours, I've mentioned is my keyboard's functioning, with I having removed all features of it nearly, except it being like a standard hardware keyboard on my computing devices such as my smartphone, with it still and endlessly doing things it should not be doing. Next is using my screen as an interface to press buttons, and it not doing it right. Finally, there's my service, and I'm getting into the stealing aspects of this, and ways I might be being held ransom and slightly paying that I just can't stop, that I always try to stop, where I have to try to do mission-critical operations, and it is people stealing my service no matter what I do, no matter what. Even at companies like YouTube here, at Google, at Facebook, at Twitter, they seem to be stealing processing power, as you'll have to get a little further into the definitions of the law, although it's very simplistic when it's compared to all the standard laws, like they're stealing your electric or working with your file system that's behind 20,000 locks illegally by them to get to it. And I'm having this huge issue finally of how long it takes for I to use some basic internet features. Where it used to take seconds, it now sometimes takes hours. Honestly, folks, this is horrendous. This is maybe a species-ending event with justice served and penalties dealt, where in the case of some of what I have to do, I might create a 2 to 3 minute video that should take 2 to 3 seconds within the range of how it can do that then takes 2 to 3 hours because of how much of my processing power, internet bandwidth, and battery resources and electrical charges are stolen or diverted or just wasted and removed from my ability to use. So here we go. POTUS, 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 President Biden, President Biden, President Biden, President Biden, Vice President Harris, Vice President Harris, Vice President Harris, Vice President Harris. I order you, I order you, I order you, I order you all, bring the sedition case of the federal conspiracy, or you're the criminals as well as President Putin, President Putin, President Putin, President Putin, President Putin, President Putin, Prime Minister Netanyahu, 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 President Jinping, President Jinping, President Jinping, President Jinping, President Jinping. Do it or else. It will be the end of your species. Cities aren't only going black. I'm under constant assault and attack. It is war where I am, where I have some cover and shelter and relief. We're under constant strikes at our defense grid with constant cyber attacks and further warfare trying to cover for it because it can't be seen. And they've developed a system to discharge the entire defense grid to a minimum ability where it seems to improperly and illegally be keeping people alive, maybe by some special powers of healing the defense grid has they don't want to talk about, or revival, when it should not be. It should be doing the basic defense against the attacks. And things are so wrong. It's the worst sort of petty gang threats and violence that can discharge the fully charged defense grid to not only leave cities in the dark, leave them completely defenseless, or worse, if they have defense grids, with the defense grids completely down, like an illegal emergency services impersonating vehicle having been made at a mill or a factory capable being allowed onto the infrastructure needing to be destroyed by the defense grid and instead being powered by it. And all it takes is one event where it wails its siren the way it takes, and it will completely discharge the defense grid. And finally, as I'm trying to set this so it doesn't go worse, like the whole planet gets destroyed, the defense grid will completely destroy what it is defending when it should instead be defending itself and the planet like people that are really the problem, who will end up being its final energy source. And after those people are the cause of the maximum discharge to a completely drained defense grid from a full charge with maximum ability to defend, they will be destroyed in order to create the energy the defense grid needs to survive. If my settings hold in a way they can never again be at least of what they were created of that will be destroyed. So follow my orders. I order it. Good luck.